U.S. history, so I'm going to walk you through the rise of the unions. So we've been focusing a lot on the men who built America, right? We've been talking about a very top-down approach. It's important to really understand and recognize that the unions and the workers are going to say, no, 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 we built America. So we need to look at who they were, what were their complaints, how did they organize, and how did we see some of the protests turn violent, and how did the reactions shape U.S. history. So that's what we're going to do. Get that note-taking guide out. We're going to go through some really good information here. And remember, if any of this goes too fast, you can always watch it later. You can pause me on Classroom, and you can get some more information that way. All right, so let's start with our first essential question. What problems faced workers that drew them to unions? Okay, so now some of this you learned about last year in world history, but you took a very England approach on that, right? It's important to note that the Industrial Revolution starts in England, but very quickly comes to the United States. Really, later after the War of 1812, we start seeing industry over here. But then our internal problems tore us apart for a while, and it's not till after the Civil War that we're really going to see the industry take off. So just like we saw in England, we're going to see a lot of those negatives come over here as well. We've got exploitation and unsafe working conditions. You have to remember, there are no rules, right? There are no rules. There are no laws stopping people working every single day of the week. And I mean, as a worker, what are you going to do? Right? If your boss says, I need you to work every single day, I mean, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? You have no other option, right? You're a poor laborer. You are stuck living in a tenement in the city. You make not very much money, but your family needs that money. Speaking of families, we've got women working 12 plus hour shifts, 6 days a week. And so in the seamstress, so the steel mills tended to be pretty brutal. So you've got really, really long hours for very low pay. There's no benefits, you guys. It's not like today. There's no 401k plan. There's no personal leave. There's no vacation time. If you get sick, guess what? You better still go to work. Go puke in the corner if you need to, right? Because if you don't show up, they'll find someone who will. So there's really no safety. And if you're hurt on the job, there's no such thing as workers' compensation, unemployment compensation. So there are some really serious problems that we need to recognize that are happening. Dirty, poorly ventilated factories where very repetitive work was done on dangerous and faulty equipment, and people got hurt all the time. So we're going to see this carry into our unit when we talk about the progressive era and how the progressives from about 1900 to 1920 will really start to change a lot of this. But it's first the workers. It's first the workers who kind of come together and say, we're done with this. Like, here's some examples of how dangerous things were. In 1882 alone, 675 workers died in work-related accidents each week. Each week, 675, you guys, think about that, per week. Can you imagine if that would happen today, how the businesses would be out of business? But it just was sort of a cost, so to speak, of doing business. And without any rules to regulate that, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change. Wages were so low that families couldn't survive unless everyone worked. We're talking the women, the children, right? Look at how young some of these kids are. Look at how young. So if you have to send your 5-year-old to work because you can't afford to even pay the rent in your one-room dirty apartment that has no ventilation, obviously that kid's not going to school. So this has some generational issues here that are really going to be a big problem. So in 1899, you can see these are the yearly salaries. And look at, we talk about a wage gap, you guys, and there's a history of the wage gap, and it's because women could and were well into the 20th century legally allowed to be paid less than men. And so that is something that we see really start here and pick up and continue and have really long-lasting effects. Child labor. Let's break this down. 20% of boys, 10% of girls under the age of 15 worked, some as young as 5 years old, and they're working these dangerous machines. Look at this guy, doesn't even have any shoes on. I mean, that is not safe. Like, I'm just looking at that and I just want to give him some shoes because I'm thinking his toes are going to get caught. This is like not a good situation. They're working in the coal mines, and kids are, they're earning 27 cents for a 14-hour day. And so you think school stinks? I tell you what, you guys, you should be glad there are mandatory school laws, because the alternative, I promise you, is much worse. There's a 5-year-old selling newspapers in Oklahoma just to make ends meet. So, okay. So now we see the problems, right? And now that's going to make the workers start to say there has to be a way we can fight this. So what's the purpose of the early unions? Let's get into our second major question here. So unions were formed right off the bat. They were originally called guilds way back in England. But we're going to start to see unions really grow in the United States after the Civil War. So after the Civil War, we see the National Labor Union as the first large-scale union of iron workers in the country. Okay, and the NLU had some successes. So let's talk about the successes here. They did persuade Congress to legalize an 8-hour workday for government workers. That was just government workers. But look at the graphic. You can see here, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will. And so they're the first ones to really push that idea of an 8-hour workday. It just didn't exist before that. The Knights of Labor. So the Knights of Labor are going to be another union, and this one has a lot of immigrants, a lot of recent immigrants who are working in the steel mills, are working in the railroads and the railroad cars, and their kind of catchphrase was, an injury to one is a concern of all. So there's this real sense in the unions of all for one and one for all, to sound a little bit like the Cleveland Cavaliers. That's kind of what they're going for. The interesting thing about the Knights of Labor is they did not discriminate by race or gender and age. And that's a rare thing. Usually the union said, well, we're only going to be for men, or we're only going to be for white people. The Knights of Labor were seen as pretty radical for their time because they did accept everybody. And they lobbied again for an 8-hour workday, not just for government workers, but for everyone. Equal pay for everyone. They did favor negotiations over strikes. So strikes are going to be a last resort, you guys. And strikes are not fun for anyone. But it is sort of a last resort that the unions could use where they all banded together. Because remember I said before, if you don't show up to work, the boss is going to find someone to fill your factory position, right? But if all 237 of you don't show up to work, then it's a problem for the boss. Then it's a problem. So the strength for unions is going to be their numbers. And that's what they're going to try to do. Now, the union movements are going to split a little bit, and they're going to fragment. We need to break that down. So we're going to have our craft unions, which are more skilled workers from one or more trades. Okay, so we're going to see Samuel Gompers. That's him right there. He's going to lead a group called the American Federation of Labor. And they're going to use bargaining and strikes to improve wages, improve those hours, and also improve working conditions. So strikes can sometimes be necessary. I mean, and we'll see that here in U.S. history, that there would not be this stuff at this moment in time really wouldn't have changed without the workers putting their foots down and getting their voices across. But strikes can turn violent, and strikes can get very nasty. And even today, strikes are very bitter. They are not fun. I can tell you about when I was a freshman in high school and my teachers went on strike. I got all kinds of stories, and I didn't quite understand everything, but even as a 14-year-old, I understood the bitterness and the anger that it left behind. And it was a 2-week strike. So I can talk about that with you more in class. Industrial unionism, this is more skilled and unskilled labor. This guy right here is Eugene Debs. Eugene Debs is going to start off as a railway worker in Chicago. He founds the American Railway Union, which is going to be mostly unskilled and semi-skilled and some skilled workers. When we say unskilled, those are the people who are just doing physical labor. They're laying the tracks, okay? Semi-skilled, you have some skills that you have to maybe apprentice for. Skilled workers, you usually have to apprentice. That would be carpentry, pipe fitting, things even today that you need to apprentice for. But the Pullman strike in Chicago, that's what gets Eugene Debs thrown into jail. And he gets thrown into jail for those Pullman railway cars that they were striking for better wages. And when he gets thrown into jail, Debs really becomes pretty radicalized. So he even said himself, I didn't go into jail a socialist, but I left jail a socialist. And so he comes out of jail, and Eugene Debs will run for president 4 times as a socialist. One of those times he's going to run for president from a jail cell because he'll speak out during World War I. So he's a really interesting character. And he also sort of reflects the way that we see some unions really go far left, okay? So what we're going to see here, this is a great graphic. It shows you the growth of union membership and how things change, okay? So we start here, post-Civil War. Workers are just starting to say, we should do something about this. Then they really grow. And at the Haymarket Square riot, that is where things go very badly for the Knights of Labor. They will be blamed for a bomb that goes off and kills several police officers. And they will be blamed for that. And so after Haymarket, look what happens. Boom, goes way down again. Unions get a really bad reputation. They're anarchists, socialists, right? So it'll go down. But then look at, it's going to slowly start to grow again. And then, whoo, here we go. Way up at the turn of the century. So look at the effects that the Haymarket Square riot has on unions. Make sure you kind of understand that there. All right. So we can't deny that some of these union leaders are going to be pretty radical socialists. So I mentioned Eugene Debs. This guy, Big Bill Haywood, he was a big guy. That's where he gets his nickname. Led a group called the Wobblies, which is also known, their official name is the Industrial Workers of the World. And here's a quote from him. The mine owners did not find the gold. They do not mine the gold. They do not mill the gold. But by some weird alchemy, all the gold belongs to them. So you can kind of hear his argument here that, hey, you guys that own this aren't doing any of the work. And you're getting all the benefits. And so he really wanted government control and equal distribution. Oh boy, did we just say equal distribution? What does that sound like? That sounds like communism, right? So can you see how at this point we're going to start to see some government officials and definitely business owners scared of the unions and start to lump all unions in with Marxism, which is just not the case, right? We're going to see some of the skilled unions just want an 8-hour workday, just want fair wages. But yeah, we're going to have this side of the coin too, and we got to recognize that. We got to recognize that the Wobblies are very far left, and Haymarket is going to be the one that will really ruin the Knights of Labor. They will never recover from that. But out of the ashes of the Knights of Labor will come the AFL, will come Samuel Gomper's AFL, and we'll also see on the flip side, we'll see Debs and Haywood that say, hey, Gompers, hey, AFL, you're not doing enough. You need to do more. So you kind of got two sides to the coin as we approach 1900. You got some unions that are saying we should go slow and steady, right? We should be asking for only what we need. And then you've got the other unions that are pretty far left, like the Wobblies, that are saying we need to demand everything now. And we need to demand complete government control and complete redistribution. And so we're really going to see that that's going to shape attitudes towards unions even today, you guys, even today, that we'll see. There's a lot of people who feel that unions are necessary. There's a lot of people who feel that unions are not needed anymore. You know, they're a relic of the past. And if anything, they're dangerous and should be broken up. And we even hear this in our state conversations about the role that unions should play. So think about that, okay? Make sure you understand Haymarket, and make sure you just kind of have a grasp on what unions were trying to do, what they were complaining about, and how they splintered into different groups in the end. All right, so feel free to watch again. Pause me if you need me. Go back. I'm happy to meet with you anytime and go over this as well.